"Get the hell out." The airport staff girl snapped loud enough for everyone in the terminal to hear, her finger pointing toward the sliding glass doors as the single father tightened his grip on his daughter. Small backpack and felt every eye turned toward him, and in that frozen second with security watching and travelers. Whispering, he stood there, humiliated, exhausted from a night flight he barely afforded, carrying the quiet weight of a life that had taught him how to endure without complaining. Because this was not just about a delayed boarding pass or a misunderstanding at the counter. This was about a man who had lost his wife to illness years earlier, who had learned to braid hair and pack lunches before dawn, who had sold his car to pay medical bills, who had taken this trip only because it was his daughter one chance to see the ocean before another round of treatments. And now, in a crowded airport, he was being treated like he did not belong, like he was a problem to be removed. And as he turned to leave with his daughter asking in a small voice whether they were in trouble, something inside him broke and steadied at the same time. Because he had learned long ago that dignity was not something others could give or take. It was something you carried quietly even when your hands were shaking. And he walked toward the exit with his head up, unaware that a series of events already set in motion was about to rewrite the moment forever. Because just outside the terminal, as he paused to calm his child and decide how to explain yet another disappointment, the ground beneath them began to vibrate. A low mechanical thunder rolling across the airfield, and heads turned as a sleek private jet descended with precision and authority, its engines cutting through the noise of the airport like a declaration. And confusion spread quickly as the jet touched down on a runway that was not scheduled, not announced, and certainly not ordinary. And the same staff who had dismissed him moments earlier rushed to radios and screens, unaware that the jet had not arrived for a celebrity or a politician, but for the quiet man standing near the exit, holding his daughter's hand. Because years before, long before life stripped him down to survival mode, he had been a brilliant aviation engineer whose work had quietly saved an entire company from collapse. A man who had walked away from wealth when his wife fell ill because no fortune mattered more than being present. And after her death, he'd stepped away completely, choosing anonymity and modest work to raise his child without losing himself to grief. And now the owner of the jet, a woman from a different world entirely, a powerful executive whose life had been saved by his designs and whose career had been built on the foundation he left behind, had finally tracked him down not to repay a debt, but to ask for his help once more. And as airport officials began to panic and redirect, she stepped onto the tarmac herself, walking with purpose through security and toward the terminal, her presence commanding silence. And when she reached the doors and saw him standing there with his daughter, the recognition in her eyes was immediate and overwhelming. Because she remembered the man who had once worked through nights without rest to fix what others said could not be fixed. The man who had refused credit and vanished when the job was done. And in front of everyone, she crossed the distance and spoke his name softly, respectfully. And in that moment, the balance of power shifted so completely that the air itself felt different. And the staff girl who had shouted moments earlier stood frozen as the executive thanked the single father for coming, apologized for the treatment he had received, and explained that the jet was there for him and his daughter not as a display of wealth, but as an invitation to be seen, to be valued, and to be reminded that the world he stepped away from had never forgotten what he gave. And as they walked toward the plane, his daughter eyes wide with disbelief, he did not look back in anger or triumph. Because this was never about revenge or proving anyone wrong. It was about a man who had survived loss without becoming bitter, who had chosen compassion over recognition, and who now stood at a crossroad where dignity met opportunity. And on board, as the jet lifted into the sky, the executive finally spoke the truth she had come to say, that the company was failing again, that lives depended on the work only he could do, and that she did not come to demand anything, only to ask. And as he listened, watching clouds pass and his daughter fall asleep against his shoulder, he realized that this moment, born from humiliation and misunderstanding, was not about returning to the past, but about choosing a future where his skills and his humanity could coexist. And by the time the plane leveled off, he had not agreed to anything yet, but he had remembered who he was before the world broke him down. Not a man defined by how others treated him at a counter, but by how he showed up when it mattered most. And long after the jet disappeared from view, those who witnessed the scene carried with them a quiet lesson that no announcement ever teaches, that you never truly know the story of the person you dismiss, that dignity can stand calmly in the face of cruelty, and that sometimes the most powerful arrivals happen only after someone is told to leave, leaving behind an unforgettable truth, that respect costs nothing, but the lack of it can change everything. And even after the jet vanished into the clouds, the meaning of what had happened continued to unfold far beyond that runway. Because inside the quiet cabin, as the engine settled into a steady rhythm, the single father stared out the window, not at the sky, but at memories he had buried for years. Remembering how ambition once ruled his days before grief humbled him, how meetings and deadlines were replaced by hospital chairs and whispered prayers, and how walking away from everything had not been an act of weakness, but of love. And when the executive finally spoke again, her voice softer now without an audience, she did not talk about money or contracts. She spoke about responsibility, about how entire teams depended on a system he designed, about how his absence had been felt, not as a gap in leadership, but as a missing conscience. And that honesty unsettled him more than any offer could, because it forced him to confront the truth. That hiding from the world had protected his heart, but also limited his impact. And as his daughter stirred awake and asked where they were going, he realized that every choice he made now would shape not only his life, but the example she would grow up watching. And so he asked the one question that mattered to him more than titles or compensation: whether he could do the work without sacrificing the present, without losing the mornings and bedtime stories that defined their bond. And when the executive answered without hesitation that the terms would be built around his life, not the other way around, something shifted inside him. Because for the first time since his loss, the world was not asking him to choose between being needed and being human. And as the jet continued forward, carrying them toward an uncertain destination, he understood that the humiliation he endured at the airport was not a cruel coincidence, but a moment that revealed how his people judge by appearance and how rarely they imagine the weight someone else carries. And while he did not know yet whether he would return to the world he left behind, he knew one thing with clarity: that no matter where he landed, he would carry himself the same way he always had, with quiet dignity, with resilience shaped by pain, and with compassion that refused to harden. Because sometimes life does not elevate you by lifting you up in public. It transforms you by reminding you who you are in private. And that lesson, learned between a crowded terminal and a private jet cutting through the sky, would guide every step he took from that moment forward. And years later, when the story had faded from headlines and whispers, the single father would still remember that day not as the moment a private jet landed for him, but as the moment he reclaimed his sense of worth. Because what stayed with him was not the power shift or the stunned faces in the terminal, but the quiet realization that dignity survives even when respect is denied, and that resilience grows strongest in those who choose compassion when it would be easier to harden. And as he eventually accepted a role that allowed him to rebuild systems while protecting the life he had built with his daughter, he became known not for authority or wealth, but for the way he listened, the way he noticed the overlooked, and the way he refused to let anyone be reduced to a first impression. And sometimes, on early mornings when airports were still waking up and the world felt suspended between departures and arrivals, he would pause and watch ordinary people hurry past, carrying invisible burdens. And he would think about how close he came to walking out, believing the worst about himself, and how easily that belief could have followed him forever. And it filled him with a quiet gratitude that he never turned bitter, that he never let humiliation define him. Because the true ending of that day was not the jet lifting into the sky. It was the choice he made to remain gentle in a harsh moment, to remain human when stripped of status, and to teach his daughter by example that who you are matters more than how loudly the world speaks to you. And in that lesson, passed on, not through words, but through lived truth, the impact of that moment endured, proving that sometimes the greatest journeys begin not with an invitation, but with a dismissal. And the most powerful landings happen only after you are told to leave.